this story resonates with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, and finding strength through life's most difficult challenges. I was in the kitchen preparing a pot of jollof rice when the doorbell rang. The familiar aroma of tomatoes, peppers, and spices filled the air as I wiped my hands on my apron and walked toward the front door. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of those ordinary days that you later realize was the dividing line between your old life and whatever comes after. When I opened the door, my daughter Amara stood there, her eyes red and swollen. In her trembling hand, she clutched a worn envelope that I recognized immediately. My heart stopped. The letter. Thomas's letter. The one he had written 15 years ago, sealed with explicit instructions that it should only be opened after my death. "Mom," Amara's voice cracked as she held up the letter. "We need to talk about this." Behind her stood my son Kofi, his usually confident posture now slumped, his face a mask of confusion and anger. The same envelope had been in my possession for all these years, locked away in the antique wooden box Thomas had given me on our 10th anniversary. A box that had been pried open without my knowledge or permission. As they walked into the living room I had maintained with my teacher's salary for 15 years since Thomas's death, I felt my carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. The letter contained the truth, a truth that would destroy everything they believed about their father, about our marriage, about our family's history, a truth that would inevitably change how they saw me. The truth I had protected them from by hiding that letter away, intending to take its secrets to my grave. I should have burned it the day Thomas died, but something had stopped me. Perhaps it was respect for his final wishes, or maybe a misplaced sense of obligation to the man who had shattered my heart long before cancer took his life. Now, as my children sat down on the sofa I had saved for 6 months to buy, their faces etched. With betrayal, I knew I would have to explain everything, not just what was in the letter, but the 15 years of lies I had told to protect them, to protect his memory, to protect myself. "Where did you find that?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "In the attic," Kofi replied, his tone accusing. "We were looking for Dad's old photo albums, and we found the box. It was addressed to us, Mom, for my children, to be opened after your mother's passing. That's what it said." Amara leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "But you're still here, Mom. You're very much alive, and we read a letter that says things that can't possibly be true. We need you to explain." I took a deep breath, remembering the day Thomas had handed me that envelope, a week before he died. "Promise me, Esther," he had said, his voice weak from the treatments that had failed to save him. "Promise me they'll know the truth someday." I had promised, thinking that someday meant after I was gone, thinking they would never have to look at me, their mother, with the knowledge of what their father had done. But now the day had come, much too soon, and I had no choice but to face it. "Let me finish cooking," I said, walking back to the kitchen. "Then we'll talk about everything." As I stirred the rice, listening to my children whispering tensely in the other room, I tried to prepare myself for the conversation that would change everything. 15 years of carefully constructed stories were about to collapse. 15 years of protecting them from the truth about the man they had idolized. 15 years of protecting myself from their judgment. The rice simmered, its familiar scent no longer comforting. Nothing would be the same after tonight. Nothing. When I came to America from Nigeria at 22, I was full of dreams. I had earned a scholarship to study education at a university in Maryland, determined to become a teacher who could make a difference. My parents had sacrificed everything for my education, and I was their pride, their hope, their investment in a better future. I was the first in my family to attend university, the first to travel abroad, the first to have opportunities they could only imagine. 2 months after I arrived, I met Thomas at a campus cultural event. He was 30, handsome, established, a financial advisor with his own practice, a beautiful home, and the kind of confidence that comes from growing up with privilege. He was also the first American to show genuine interest in me beyond my accent or my background. He asked about my family, my dreams, my homeland. He listened when I spoke about my passion for education and my plans to eventually return to Nigeria to build a school in my village. "You're different, Esther," he told me on our third date. "You're not like the women I've dated before. You have substance, purpose." I was young and flattered by the attention of this successful American man who seemed to value my mind as much as my beauty. When he proposed 6 months later, I accepted without hesitation, dazzled by what seemed like a fairy tale romance. My parents were concerned about the speed of our relationship, but they trusted my judgment. "Just be sure he respects our ways, our values," my father said during one of our rare, expensive international calls. "He does, Papa," I assured him. "Thomas loves learning about our culture. He even wants to visit Nigeria next year." That visit never happened. Neither did my return to build that school. Instead, I graduated, got my teaching certification, and settled into life as Mrs. Thomas Richardson, moving into his large colonial-style house in an affluent suburb of Baltimore. We had our children, Kofi when I was 25, and Amara 2 years later. From the outside, we were the picture of the successful, multicultural American family. Thomas was proud to show us off at his firm's functions, proud of his exotic wife and beautiful mixed-race children. What no one saw were the ways my dreams were slowly being reshaped to fit into his life. How my plans to return to Nigeria became someday plans that were always pushed further into the future. How my culture was welcome as decorative elements in our home, but not as substantive influences on our children's upbringing. "They're American, Esther," Thomas would say whenever I tried to teach the children my mother tongue or insisted on cultural traditions. "They need to fit in here, not stand out more than they already will." I compromised, again and again, telling myself it was for the children's sake, for the family's harmony. I taught at a local elementary school, funneling my passion for education into my students since I couldn't build that school back home. I sent money to my family monthly, supporting my younger siblings' education. I made Nigerian meals on Sundays, keeping that small connection to home alive. For 10 years, we lived what appeared to be a good life. Thomas provided well. The children thrived. I had my career. If I sometimes felt a deep longing for home, if I sometimes felt that Thomas saw me more as an accessory to his life than a full partner in it, I pushed those feelings aside. Then came the day I found the first email. I wasn't snooping. I had borrowed Thomas's laptop because mine was being repaired, and his email was open. The message was from a woman named Vanessa, and its familiarity, its intimacy was unmistakable. "Last night was amazing," it read. "I can't wait to feel your hands on me again." When I confronted Thomas, he was dismissive at first, claiming it was a misunderstanding. When I persisted, showing him the evidence, his dismissal turned to anger. "What were you doing going through my emails?" he demanded, as if my transgression was the real issue. "I wasn't going through anything," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Your email was open. Is this why you've been working late 3 nights a week?" The fight that followed was ugly. Thomas eventually admitted to the affair, but with qualifications that cut me more deeply than the infidelity itself. "You've changed, Esther," he said. "You're always tired, always talking about the children or your school or your family back home. I have needs too." I was 32, with 2 young children, teaching full-time, maintaining our home, and sending money to my family in Nigeria. Of course I was tired. But I hadn't changed. I had simply become more fully myself, more rooted in my responsibilities, while Thomas had apparently expected me to remain the exotic, energetic young woman he had married. We went to counseling. He promised to end the affair, for the sake of Kofi and Amara, who were 7 and 5 at the time, I tried to rebuild our marriage. For almost a year, things seemed better. Thomas was more attentive, more involved with the children. We even planned a trip to Nigeria for the following summer, the trip he had promised years before. Then I found evidence of another affair. Different woman, same story. This time my confrontation was met with less defensiveness and more resignation. "I don't think I can be what you need, Esther," Thomas said, sitting at our kitchen island, looking defeated. "I love you, but I'm not cut out for this kind of life." "What kind of life?" I asked. "A faithful one? A responsible one?" He shook his head. "I feel trapped. I've felt trapped for years." The pain of that statement nearly brought me to my knees. 10 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and he felt trapped by us. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand why he had pursued me, married me, fathered children with me if he was going to feel trapped by the very life he had created. Instead, I sat across from him, my hands folded to stop their trembling, and asked, "What do you want to do?" "I think we should separate," he said. "I need some space to figure things out." Space. That was the American concept I had never fully understood. This idea that people needed space from their commitments, their families, their responsibilities. In my culture, in my upbringing, you didn't get space from marriage. You worked through problems together as a unit. But I was exhausted from trying to make Thomas want our life together. So I agreed to a separation, with one condition. The children stay with me in this house. You can see them whenever you want, but they keep their school, their friends, their stability. Thomas agreed easily. Too easily, I later realized. He moved into an apartment downtown, saw the children on weekends, and continued his life with a freedom I couldn't comprehend wanting. 3 months into our separation, Thomas was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start, 6 months at most. Despite everything, despite the pain and betrayal, I moved him back into our home. What else could I have done? He was my children's father, my husband by law, if not by heart anymore. And he was dying. My own parents had raised me to honor my commitments, especially in times of hardship. And the children were too young to understand the complexities of why their father had left. All they knew was that he was sick and needed care. So I became his caretaker, alongside being a mother, a teacher, the maintainer of our home. I scheduled his appointments, administered his medications, helped him to the bathroom when he became too weak to walk alone, all while shielding the children from the worst of his decline. Thomas lasted 4 months. In his final weeks, as the cancer ravaged his body and the morphine clouded his mind, he had moments of startling clarity and remorse. "I didn't deserve you, Esther," he told me one night as I adjusted his pillows. "I never deserved any of you." A week before he died, he handed me an envelope for Kofi and Amara, he said. "To be opened after you're gone. It explains everything. Things they should know someday, but not while they're still young. Promise me they'll get it." I promised, not knowing what everything entailed, but suspecting it was some kind of confession or apology for his infidelities. I put the envelope away, focusing instead on making his final days as comfortable as possible. After Thomas died, I found myself a 35-year-old widow with 2 grieving children, a mortgage, and a life that looked nothing like what I had envisioned when I came to America 13 years earlier. The separation had been private, known only to us and a few close friends. To everyone else, including the children, Thomas had been a devoted husband until the end, a loving father taken too soon by a merciless disease. I chose to maintain that narrative. What good would it do to tell Kofi and Amara about their father's infidelities, his desire to leave our family? They were mourning the loss of their daddy. They needed positive memories to hold on to, not disillusionment. So I became the keeper of a false history. I displayed photos of happier times. I told stories of Thomas's good qualities, his intelligence, his charm, the way he had coached Kofi's soccer team before he got sick, the bedtime stories he had read to Amara. I created the father I wished he had been, the husband I had wanted him to be. And somewhere along the way, I almost started to believe the story myself. Almost. But on quiet nights, when the children were asleep, I would sometimes take out that envelope and look at it, wondering what everything Thomas had felt compelled to confess. I never opened it. I respected his wish that the children only read it after my death, when they would be adults, better equipped to process whatever painful truths it contained. Instead, I placed it in the antique wooden box he had given me on our 10th anniversary, locked it, and put it in the attic among other keepsakes from our marriage, out of sight, if never completely out of mind. For 15 years I raised Kofi and Amara alone, working hard to provide them with opportunities, stability, and love. I never remarried, focusing instead on my children and my career. I became a respected teacher, eventually moving into administration as a vice principal. I put Kofi through college and was doing the same for Amara. I maintained the house, kept up with the mortgage, created a good life for us, and I protected them from the truth about their father. Until today, as I placed the jollof rice on the dining table, along with the grilled chicken and plantains I had prepared earlier, I wondered if this would be our last peaceful family meal. Kofi and Amara sat down silently, the envelope placed between them like a ticking bomb. "Let's eat first," I said, serving them as I always had. "Then we'll talk." We ate in uncomfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I watched my children, Kofi, now 22, a recent college graduate working at a tech firm, and Amara, 20, in her second year of nursing school. They were good people, hardworking and kind, with their father's charm and my determination. I had done my best for them, given them everything I could. Would that be enough when they learned the truth? After dinner, we moved to the living room. I sat in my usual armchair, while they took the sofa across from me. The envelope lay on the coffee table between us. "I know you have questions," I began. "But first, I want to know exactly what the letter says. I've never read it." Kofi and Amara exchanged a look. "You never read it?" Amara asked, disbelief clear in her voice. I shook my head. "Your father gave it to me a week before he died. He said it was for you two, to be opened after my death. I respected his wishes." "But you knew what was in it," Kofi said. "It wasn't a question." "I knew some of it," I admitted. "Not all, not the details." Amara picked up the letter and held it out to me. "Read it, Mom. Please." I took the pages, 3 sheets of paper covered in Thomas's handwriting, now faded after 15 years. As I began to read, I felt a cold dread spreading through me. "My dearest Kofi and Amara, if you're reading this, it means your mother has joined me in whatever comes after this life, and you are now truly on your own. I am so sorry for that. I am sorry for many things. I'm writing this in my final days with clarity that only comes when you know your time is short. There are truths you deserve to know about me, about our family, truths your mother protected you from, because she is a far better person than I ever was. First, you should know that at the time of my diagnosis, your mother and I were separated. I had left our family 3 months earlier, not because of any failing on her part, but because of my own weaknesses. I had been unfaithful to her multiple times throughout our marriage. The last affair had been going on for nearly a year, when I finally told her I wanted to leave. Your mother, with her incredible grace and dignity, agreed to a separation that would minimize the impact on you both. She never spoke ill of me to you, never used you as weapons against me as many might have done. Even when I became ill, she welcomed me back home, cared for me until the end, and preserved my dignity in your eyes. But there is a more difficult truth you must know. A truth I'm deeply ashamed of, but one you deserve to hear. When I married your mother, I was not the man she thought I was. I pursued her because she was beautiful, intelligent, and different from anyone I had dated before. But I never fully respected her dreams or her culture. I saw her as an acquisition, an exotic wife who would make me look worldly and progressive to my colleagues and friends. I promised her we would visit Nigeria, that she could maintain connections to her heritage, that her culture would be part of our family life. But once we were married, I subtly discouraged these things, wanting her to assimilate completely into my world instead. Most unforgivably, I was not honest about our finances. While I projected success and stability, the truth was that I had accumulated significant debt even before we married. Debt from bad investments, excessive spending, and a lifestyle I couldn't actually afford. Throughout our marriage, I hid financial problems from your mother, taking out loans and second mortgages without her knowledge. When I died, I left her not with security, but with hidden debts totaling over $300,000, secured against our home and my life insurance policy. If she managed to keep our house, put you through college, and maintain any quality of life, it was through her own incredible strength and resourcefulness, not because I provided for my family as I should have. I know this is painful to read. It shatters the image you've had of me, the image your mother so lovingly maintained. But you are adults now, or nearly so, and you deserve to know who your father truly was. A deeply flawed man who hurt the people he should have cherished above all others. I ask for your forgiveness, though I don't deserve it. More importantly, I ask you to recognize the extraordinary woman your mother is. Any good qualities you see in me in your memories were likely her creations, her way of giving you the father she wished I had been. Love her, honor her, and please, do not judge her for the protective lies she told. They came from a place of such deep love for you both. With profound regret and enduring love. Your father, Thomas. I finished reading and looked up to find my children, watching me intently, their eyes filled with confusion and pain. Is it true? Kofi asked, his voice tight. All of it? I carefully folded the letter and placed it back on the coffee table. Yes, I said simply. It's true. The affairs, the separation, the debt. Amara's voice cracked on the last word. I nodded. The affairs began when you were very young, Kofi. There were several over the years. We separated 3 months before his diagnosis. And yes, he left substantial debt that I didn't know about until after he died. $300,000? Kofi's eyes widened. How did you manage? How did you keep the house? Put me through college? I took a deep breath. I worked very hard. I took extra jobs, summer school, tutoring, curriculum development. I negotiated with the banks. I sold his car and most of his valuable possessions. I received some help from friends from church. It took me almost 10 years to clear the debt completely. Why didn't you tell us? Amara asked, tears streaming down her face. All these years, you let us believe he was this perfect husband and father. What would have been the point of telling you the truth when you were children? I asked gently. You adored your father. You were grieving. Would it have helped you to know he had betrayed us? That he had left us with debt instead of security? Would that have made your childhood better? But we're not children anymore, Kofi said, anger creeping into his voice. I'm 22. Amara is 20. You could have told us the truth years ago. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But by then, the story was established. You had good memories of your father. I didn't want to take those away from you. So you just kept lying, Amara said. The hurt in her voice cut through me. I protected. You, I corrected. And yes, that involved not telling you the whole truth. But everything I did, every choice I made, was to give you the best life I could under the circumstances. Did you ever love him? Kofi asked suddenly. Or was that a lie too? The question caught me off guard. I loved him very much when we married, I said after a moment. And there were good times, especially when you two were born. Thomas could be charming, generous, fun. He wasn't a monster. He was a flawed man who made selfish choices. And you stayed with him even after you knew about the affairs? Amara looked incredulous. I stayed until I couldn't anymore, I explained. I tried to make the marriage work for your sakes, for the family we had built. In my culture, in how I was raised, you don't easily walk away from marriage, especially when children are involved. But eventually, I agreed to the separation. Then, he got sick and you took care of him anyway, Kofi finished, his expression softening slightly. I nodded. He was your father. He was dying. What else could I have done? The room fell silent as my children processed everything they had learned. I watched their faces, trying to gauge their reactions, wondering if this revelation had irrevocably damaged their trust in me. Finally, Amara spoke. I don't know how to feel about any of this. Everything I thought I knew about our family seems like a lie. Not everything, I said firmly. My love for you both has always been real. The values I taught you, honesty, hard work, compassion, those are real. The home I built for us, the life we've shared, that's all real. But Dad, Kofi trailed off, struggling with the new image of his father. Your father loved you, I said, believing this much at least was true. His failings were as a husband, not as a father. He was proud of you both, delighted by you. That's why I preserved those aspects of him for you. I just don't understand why he would write this letter, Amara said. If he wanted us to have good memories of him, why confess everything this way? I considered the question. I think perhaps in his final days, facing his own mortality, Thomas wanted forgiveness, or at least understanding. And he wanted to make sure you knew the truth about me, that I had been wronged, but had protected you anyway. It was both selfish and selfless, which was very much who your father was. And you never planned to let us read it, Kofi stated. I planned to honor his wish that you read it after I was gone, I confirmed. When you would be older, more established in your lives, better able to process it without it defining your understanding of family, of marriage. Did anyone else know the truth? Amara asked. All these years, did you have anyone to talk to about this? I thought about the lonely years after Thomas died, carrying the burden of debt and deception alone. A few close friends knew parts of it. Pastor Gaines knew about the affairs and the separation. My friend Grace from church knew about the financial struggles. But no one knew everything. I didn't want people's pity, and I didn't want any of it getting back to you. Kofi stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to us. When he turned around, his eyes were wet. Mom, I don't know whether to be angry at you for lying or amazed by what you did for us. You can be both, I said gently. I understand. $300,000, he repeated, shaking his head. All those extra jobs, the long hours. I just thought you were being strict about money. I had no idea. Amara moved to sit beside me, taking my hand. All those times I complained about not having the expensive clothes other girls had, or when I was mad that we couldn't afford the spring break trip to Florida. You were drowning in debt he left you with. I squeezed her hand. I never wanted you to feel deprived. I wanted you to have normal childhoods, not shadowed by financial stress or your father's mistakes. But at what cost to you? Kofi demanded, his voice rising. You worked yourself to exhaustion for years. You never remarried, never even dated as far as I know. You put your entire life on hold to clean up his mess and give us a stable home. I hadn't expected this reaction. Anger on my behalf, rather, than at me. It touched me deeply, even as I wanted to correct his perception. I didn't put my life on hold, I said. I built the life I chose. Yes, it was hard at times, but I had my career, which I love. I had my community at church. Most importantly, I had you two, watching you grow, helping you become the people you are now. That has been my greatest joy. But you could have had more, Amara insisted. You deserved more. I smiled at my beautiful daughter, so passionate and protective. Perhaps. But we don't always get what we deserve in this life, good or bad. We get what we get, and we make the best of it. Kofi came back to the sofa, sitting heavily. I just keep thinking about how we idolized him, how I wanted to be just like him. All those times I bragged to my friends about my successful father, the financial advisor. You can still admire the good in him, I said. His intelligence, his charm, the love he had for you. Humans are complicated, Kofi. Your father did wrong, by me. But that doesn't erase the genuine moments of joy and love in our family. I don't know if I can separate those things, he admitted. We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. Outside, the daylight was fading, casting the living room in soft shadows. I thought about turning on a lamp, but didn't want to break the fragile moment. It felt as though we were in a liminal space, between the family narrative we had lived with for 15 years and whatever new understanding would emerge from this revelation. Finally, Amara asked the question I had been dreading. Mom, what else haven't you told us? Are there other secrets we should know? I shook my head. No, this was the big one. Everything else has been the truth. My love for you, my pride in you, the values I've tried to instill. Those have always been real. I need some time to process all this, Kofi said, standing up again. I'm not angry at you, Mom. I need to think. Of course, I said, understanding his need for space. Take all the time you need, both of you, and know that I'm here when you want to talk more. Amara hugged me tightly before following, her brother to the door. I love you, Mom, she whispered. That hasn't changed. After they left, I sat alone in the darkening room, the letter still on the coffee table in front of me. I felt drained, as if I had run a marathon, but also strangely lighter. The secret I had carried for so long was finally out. My children knew the truth, not just about their father, but about me, about the choices I had made. I picked up the letter and read it again. Thomas's words bringing back memories of those difficult final months. He had been right about one thing. I had created a better version of him for our children. But I wondered now if that had truly been the right choice. Had I robbed them of the chance to know their real father, flaws, and all? Had my protective lie ultimately done more harm than good? These questions had no easy answers. All I knew was that I had done what I thought was best at the time, with the wisdom and strength I had then. Whether my children would judge me harshly, for those choices remained to be seen. I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally out. After 15 years of safeguarding Thomas's secrets and crafting a family narrative built partly on fiction, I was free from that burden. Now I just had to hope that the foundation I had built, with my children, a foundation of love, if not complete honesty, was strong enough to withstand this seismic shift in their understanding of our family history. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. Kofi and Amara kept their distance, texting occasionally to check in but not coming by the house. I gave them the space they needed, even as I worried about what they were thinking, how they were processing the revelations. I went to work, taught my classes, attended meetings, going through the motions of normal life while feeling anything but normal. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but attributed it to end-of-semester fatigue. Only Grace, my closest friend at school, knew something significant had happened. They found the letter, I told her during our lunch break. Grace was one of the few people who knew about Thomas's affairs, though not the full extent of the financial deception. Her eyes widened. Thomas's letter? The one that was supposed to stay sealed until after you were gone? I nodded, pushing my salad around on my plate without eating. They were looking for photo albums in the attic and found the box. Now they know everything. The affairs, the separation, the debt. Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. How did they take it? I'm not sure, I admitted. Shocked, confused, hurt that I kept the truth from them for so long. They're taking some time to process it all. They'll come around, Grace assured me. Those kids adore you. Once the initial shock wears off, they'll understand why you did what you did. I wished I shared her confidence. I've basically admitted that I've been lying to them their entire lives. How do you come back from that kind of revelation? You haven't been lying, Grace corrected firmly. You've been protecting them from painful truths they weren't ready for. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where they're standing, I created a false image of their father and our marriage. I let them believe in a family history that wasn't real. Grace sighed. Esther, you did what any good mother would do. You sheltered them from pain they didn't need to feel. You gave them security and stability when their world could have been shattered. That's not lying, that's love. Her words were comforting, but they didn't erase my doubts. Had I really acted out of love, or had there been an element of pride in my decision? Hadn't I also been protecting myself from their judgment, from having to explain why I had stayed with a man who repeatedly betrayed me? On the 5th day after the revelation, Kofi called. Can I come by tonight? Around 7? Of course, I said, my heart racing. I'll be here. Just me, he added. Amara needs a little more time. That didn't surprise me. Amara had always been the more sensitive of the two, taking longer to process emotional upheavals. Kofi tended to confront things head-on, wanting to resolve conflicts quickly. I spent the afternoon cleaning the already clean house, then prepared Kofi's favorite meal, beef stew with rice and fried plantains. It was what I always made when he came home from college for visits, a taste of the home and childhood he had known. He arrived precisely at 7, looking tired but composed. We ate dinner with minimal conversation, sticking to safe topics. His job, a movie he had recently seen, a funny story about his roommate. It was only after we had finished eating and moved to the living room that he broached the real subject of his visit. I've been thinking a lot about everything, he began, sitting across from me. About Dad, about what he did, about the choices you made afterward. I nodded, giving him space to continue. At first I was just angry, at him for being nothing like the man I thought he was, and yes, at you for maintaining that illusion. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. He paused, collecting his thoughts. The Dad I knew, the one I have memories of, that was real to me. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to my soccer games, who read me stories at night. That person existed in my experience, even if there was this whole other side to him I never saw. He did love you, I affirmed. Those moments were genuine. Kofi nodded. I know that now. And I've realized that what you did, protecting that image of him, wasn't just about him. It was about giving me and Amara the security of believing in our family, in having a father we could be proud of. Relief washed over me. That's exactly what I was trying to do. But Mom, he continued, his expression serious, I need to know something. All those years of working multiple jobs, of stretching every dollar, was it worth it? Wouldn't it have been easier to just sell the house, declare bankruptcy, Start fresh somewhere else? The question caught me off guard. I had never really considered any other path than the one I had taken. It might have been easier in some ways, I acknowledged. But this was our home, where you and Amara grew up, where we had stability and community. Walking away from that would have meant disrupting your lives even more after losing your father. And in my culture, in how I was raised, you don't abandon your obligations, no matter how unfairly they were thrust upon you. But $300,000, Kofi said, shaking his head. I still can't wrap my mind around it. You paid all that off on a teacher's salary? Teacher, tutor, curriculum developer, summer school instructor, I listed. Plus, I sold almost everything of value that was just mine. Jewelry, some artwork I had brought from Nigeria, eventually even my wedding ring. It took nearly 10 years, but yes, I paid it all. Kofi was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then he asked, "Why didn't you remarry? Was it because of what Dad did, or?" I smiled gently at his hesitation. It was a personal question, but I understood his need to make sense of the choices that had shaped our family life. It wasn't a conscious decision not to remarry, I explained. At first, I was too busy surviving, working multiple jobs, raising you two, keeping our home. Dating wasn't even on my radar. Later, when things stabilized somewhat, I had gotten used to my independence, to making decisions without having to consult anyone. And I had you and Amara, my career, my friends, my church community. My life felt full. But you were alone, he persisted. Being alone and being lonely are different things, I told him. I wasn't lonely very often, and the freedom I found after your father, the freedom to live according to my own values, to make choices without compromise, that was valuable to me in ways I hadn't expected. Kofi seemed to consider this carefully. I think I understand. After being with someone who didn't fully respect your dreams or your heritage, being on your own must have been liberating in some ways. His insight surprised me. When had my son become so perceptive? Yes, I agreed. Though I wouldn't have chosen this path, there were unexpected gifts in it. I have one more question, Kofi said, leaning forward. All these years you've maintained this family narrative about Dad being this perfect husband and father. Was that difficult? Did it feel like a betrayal of yourself? The question pierced straight to the heart of the matter, to doubts I had rarely allowed myself to examine. Sometimes, I admitted. There were moments when I would hear you or Amara speaking about your father with such admiration, and I would think about the pain he had caused, the burdens he had left me with, and yes, it felt like I was betraying myself by staying silent. I took a deep breath before continuing. But then I would look at your faces, so confident, so secure in your family identity. And I would remind myself that the choice wasn't really about me or your father. It was about you and Amara, about giving you the emotional security I believed you needed. And now? Do you regret that we found the letter? Kofi asked. I regret that you found it now, like this, without me having the chance to prepare you, I said honestly. I always intended for you to know the truth eventually, when you were older, more established in your lives. But I can't change what's happened. All we can do now is find a way forward with this new understanding. Kofi nodded, then surprised me by moving to sit beside me on the couch. He took my hand, his expression solemn. Mom, I want you to know something. Learning the truth about Dad has been difficult, but it hasn't changed how I see you. If anything, I respect you more now, knowing what you overcame, what you sacrificed for us. Tears filled my eyes at his words. Thank you, I whispered, squeezing his hand. But, he continued, I do think you need to talk to Amara. She's struggling, more with this than I am. She feels betrayed, I guess. Not just by Dad, but by the whole family narrative. I'll call her tomorrow, I promised. Good, Kofi said, then added with a small smile. And Mom, maybe it's time to start thinking about what you want for the rest of your life. You've spent 15 years taking care of us, paying off Dad's debts, maintaining this image of the perfect family. You're only 55. There's still time for you to pursue some of those dreams you put aside. His words touched me deeply. When had my son become so wise, so thoughtful? I'll think about that, I promised, knowing he was right. After 15 years of living for others, perhaps it was time to reconsider what I wanted for myself. After Kofi left, I sat alone in my living room, reflecting on our conversation. It had gone better than I had dared to hope. He had processed the truth with remarkable maturity, seeing beyond his initial shock to understand the complex choices I had made. Now, I just had to hope that Amara could find her way to a similar understanding. My daughter had always been more emotional, more sensitive to perceived injustices. The revelation would have cut her deeply, challenging not just her image of her father, but her entire understanding of our family history. As I prepared for bed, that night I found myself looking at old photos, pictures of Thomas with the children, family portraits from happier times. In one, taken at Amara's 5th birthday party, Thomas was lifting her high in the air, both of them laughing, while 7-year-old Kofi watched with a broad smile. It was a genuine moment of joy, captured forever. That was the complexity I had never fully conveyed to my children, that their father could be both the man who betrayed and abandoned us, and the man who had brought real happiness into our lives. That marriages, families, people were rarely all good or all bad, but rather complex tapestries of love and disappointment, joy and pain. Perhaps that was the most important lesson they could take from this revelation. Not that their father was a villain, or that I was a martyr, but that life was messy, complicated, and rarely followed the neat narratives we created to make sense of it. With that thought, I put the photos away and went to bed, feeling more at peace than I had since the day my children had appeared at my door with that fateful envelope. Amara didn't call the next day, or the day after. When a week had passed, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I called her, but the conversation was brief and strained. "I'm still processing everything, Mom," she said, her voice distant. "I'll come by when I'm ready." "I understand," I told her, though my heart ached at her coldness. "Take all the time you need. I'm here when you want to talk." Another week passed. Kofi came by for dinner twice, each time assuring me that Amara just needed space, that she would come around eventually. But I knew my daughter. She felt things deeply, and perceived betrayals cut her to the core. Finally, 3 weeks after the initial revelation, Amara texted me. "Can we meet at Riverside Park tomorrow at 1, just us?" The choice of location was telling. The park had been a special place for us when she was growing up. We had gone there for picnics, for quiet talks, when she was navigating the turbulent waters of adolescence, for celebrations when she had achieved something significant. It was neutral ground, away from the house that contained so many memories of the father she was now reassessing. The next day was unseasonably warm for November, the sun casting a golden light over the autumn leaves as I made my way to our usual spot, a bench overlooking the river. Amara was already there, sitting with her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, looking so much like the poised young woman she had become. "Thank you for meeting me," I said as I sat beside her, leaving some space between us. She nodded but didn't look at me directly. I needed time to sort through my feelings. "I understand." It was a lot to take in. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the river flow past. A family with young children walked by, the little ones laughing as they chased falling leaves. "I've been angry," Amara finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "Not just at Dad for what he did, but at you for keeping it from me, for creating this This fairy tale about our family that wasn't real. It wasn't all a fairy tale, I countered gently. The love was real. The good memories you have, those were real moments. But they existed alongside lies, she said. Affairs, debt, separation, these huge things that shaped our lives that I knew nothing about. Do you have any idea what it's like to suddenly realize your childhood memories are filtered through this protective bubble of deception? Her words stung, but I recognized the pain behind them. I never meant to deceive you, Amara. I wanted to protect you from pain I didn't think you needed to feel. But it wasn't your decision to make, she insisted, finally turning to look at me. You decided what truth I could handle, what reality I was allowed to know. Don't you see how patronizing that is? I hadn't expected this perspective. In all my years of maintaining the family narrative, I had seen it solely as an act of maternal protection, never as a form of control or condescension. I never thought of it that way, I admitted. I was doing what I thought was best for you and Kofi. You were children who had just lost your father. I didn't want to burden you with adult complexities you weren't equipped to understand. But I'm not a child anymore, Amara said, her voice rising slightly. I haven't been for years. Why didn't you tell me the truth when I was old enough to understand? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times in recent weeks. By then, the narrative was established, I explained. You and Kofi had these positive memories of your father, this understanding of our family that gave you security. I didn't want to disrupt that, to make you question everything you thought you knew about your childhood. So instead, you let me find out through a letter he wrote, 15 years after his death. Amara said bitterly. Do you have any idea how disorienting that is? How betrayed I feel. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I'm sorry, I said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. I never intended for you to find out this way. If I could change how this happened, I would. But you wouldn't change the decision to keep the truth from me in the first place, she observed, her perception cutting as always. I considered my answer carefully. I don't know. That's the honest answer, Amara. At the time, it seemed like the only right choice. Looking back now, seeing how hurt you are by the revelation, I question whether I made the right decision. But I can't know for certain what would have happened if I had chosen differently. She was quiet for a long moment, absently pulling at a loose thread on her sleeve. I keep thinking about all those times I talked about Dad like he was this perfect man, she said finally. How I would tell my friends about his success, his charm, how devoted he was to you. I built so much of my understanding of relationships on what I thought you and Dad had. This was a consequence I hadn't fully considered. How the idealized image of Thomas and our marriage might have shaped Amara's expectations for her own relationships. I'm sorry if that created unrealistic expectations, I said. No marriage is perfect, Amara. Even the good ones have struggles, compromises, disappointments. But most don't have serial cheating and secret debt, she pointed out. No, I agreed. What your father did was beyond the normal challenges of marriage. But I hope you don't take from this the lesson that all men are untrustworthy, or that marriage itself is a trap. There are good men in this world, partnerships built on mutual respect and honesty. Like you and Dad had? The sarcasm in her voice was palpable. No, I acknowledged. Not like what Thomas and I had, but what we had isn't all there is. Amara sighed deeply. I'm not sure what to believe anymore. About relationships, about family, about anything. It feels like my whole foundation has been shaken. I understood her disorientation all too well. I had felt something similar when I first discovered Thomas's affairs, when the life I thought I had was revealed to be partially an illusion. Foundations can be rebuilt, I told her. Stronger, more authentic than before. That's what I had to do after your father died. Reconstruct my understanding of life, of family, of what was possible for us. And we created something good, didn't we? Different from what I had envisioned when I was young, but still valuable, still love-filled. We did, she admitted, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. But Mom, I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, I promised. Were you ever going to tell us the truth? If we hadn't found that letter, would you have ever told us what really happened? I considered lying, saying what I knew would comfort her, but I had promised honesty. I don't know, I admitted. I always thought that someday, when you were older, more established in your lives, I might tell you. But I can't say with certainty that I would have found the courage to do so. She nodded, seeming to appreciate the truthfulness of my answer, if not its content. One more question, she said. In the letter, Dad said he pursued you because you were exotic, different from women he'd dated before. Was that true? Did he fetishize you? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't one Kofi had asked, perhaps because as a young man he hadn't been as attuned to the dynamics of racialized attraction. Yes, I said after a moment. I believe there was an element of that in his initial attraction to me. I was young and naive when we met, flattered by his attention. It was only years later that I recognized certain patterns. The way he would show me off at firm events, the way he would subtly discourage aspects of my Nigerian identity while praising my exotic beauty to his colleagues. That's awful, Amara said, her expression a mix of disgust and sadness. It wasn't all awful, I qualified. There was genuine connection too, especially in the beginning. But yes, looking back, I can see that race and cultural difference played a complicated role in our relationship, in ways I wasn't equipped to fully understand at the time. And you stayed with him anyway. I loved him, I said simply. And by the time I began to see these patterns clearly, we had you and Kofi. Family means something different in my culture than it sometimes does here in America. You don't easily walk away, especially when children are involved. Amara was quiet again, processing. When she spoke next, her voice was softer. All those years of working multiple jobs, paying off his debt, raising us alone. Didn't you ever resent us? For tying you to his legacy? Never, I said firmly, reaching for her hand again. This time, she let me take it. Not for one single moment. You and Kofi have been my greatest joys, my deepest purpose. Whatever difficulties came with motherhood, they were infinitely outweighed by the love, the pride, the meaning you brought to my life. Tears filled Amara's eyes. Even when I was being difficult? Even when I was a moody teenager who complained about everything? I laughed softly. Even then. Especially then. Because those were the times you needed my love most. Whether you realized it or not, she wiped away a tear. I just keep thinking about how hard it must have been for you. All those years of carrying these secrets alone. Working so hard to keep our lives stable. Didn't you ever want to just scream the truth? Let everyone know what he had done? Sometimes, I admitted. There were moments of anger, of exhaustion, when I wanted to tear down the image I had helped create. But those moments passed. What remained was my commitment to giving you and Kofi the most stable, loving childhood I could, under the circumstances life had handed us. Amara nodded, then surprised me by moving closer and laying her head on my shoulder, as she had done so many times as a child. I'm still processing all of this, she said. I'm still hurt and confused. But I want you to know that I love you, Mom. That hasn't changed. Relief washed over me at her words. That's all that matters to me, I told her, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. We sat like that for a while, watching the river, each lost in our own thoughts. The revelation had changed things between us. How could it not? But the fundamental bond remained. We would find a new equilibrium, a new understanding built on more complete truth. As we walked back to the parking lot later, Amara asked, "What happens now? With the three of us, I mean." "That's up to you and Kofi," I said. "I've been carrying this secret for 15 years. Now that it's out, what we do with it, how we move forward, that should be a decision we make together." She nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. "I'd like that. No more unilateral decisions about what truths we can handle, okay?" "Okay," I agreed, recognizing the wisdom in her request. From now on, complete honesty between us. As I drove home after our meeting, I felt cautiously optimistic. The conversation with Amara had been difficult, but necessary. She had asked hard questions, challenged my perspective in ways that made me reconsider my own choices. But beneath the hurt and confusion, her love remained. We had a foundation to build upon, one more authentic than before. That night, I called Kofi and told him about my conversation with his sister. "She's still processing," I explained. "But I think we've made a start toward understanding each other." "That's good," he said. "I was worried about her. She's been so quiet these past weeks." "She needed time," I said. "And she needed to express her hurt, her sense of betrayal. Those feelings are valid, even if they're painful for me to hear." "So what now?" Kofi asked, echoing his sister's question. "Now we find a new way forward, together," I said. "No more secrets, no more protective eyes, just the truth, complex as it is, and our love for each other, which has never been a lie." "I'd like that," Kofi said. "Maybe the three of us could have dinner this weekend. Start fresh?" "I think that's a wonderful idea," I agreed. After we hung up, I went to my bedroom and opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a small carved wooden box that had belonged to my grandmother in Nigeria. I had brought it with me when I came to America, one of the few family heirlooms I possessed. From it, I took a photograph I had kept hidden all these years, a picture of Thomas and me on our wedding day, unlike the formal wedding portraits that were displayed in our family albums. This one was candid, taken during a moment when we didn't know we were being photographed. Thomas was whispering something in my ear, and I was laughing, my head thrown back in uninhibited joy. I looked at our young faces, at the genuine happiness captured in that moment. Despite everything that came after, the betrayals, the lies, the hardships, this moment had been real. Our love, at least in the beginning, had been real. Perhaps that was the most important lesson in all of this. That life rarely follows neat narratives of heroes and villains, of perfect loves or complete betrayals. Rather, it unfolds in messy, complicated ways, with joy and pain often intertwined, with people who hurt us also giving us moments of genuine happiness. I put the photo back in the box, but this time, I placed the box on my dresser instead of hiding it away. No more secrets I had promised my children, no more protective lies, just the truth, in all its complexity, and our love for each other, which had been the one constant in our family story. The dinner that weekend was awkward at first. Kofi arrived early, helping me prepare the meal as he often did. Amara came, 15 minutes late, her posture still slightly defensive, though she had brought a bottle of wine, a peace offering of sorts. We made small talk as we ate, discussing work, school, inconsequential topics that felt safe. It wasn't until we had finished the main course that Kofi cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "I think we should talk about where we go from here," he said. "Now that everything's out in the open." Amara set down her glass. "What is there to say? We know the truth now. Dad wasn't who we thought he was. Mom kept secrets to protect us. It is what it is." "It's more than that," Kofi insisted. This changes our whole family narrative. I mean, I grew up wanting to be just like Dad. Successful, respected, a good provider. Now I find out he was unfaithful, financially irresponsible, and left Mom with massive debt. It makes me question everything I thought I knew about him, about what kind of man I want to be. I hadn't considered this angle. How the revelation might impact Kofi's sense of masculine identity, his understanding of what it meant to be a good man, a good husband, a good father. Your father had good qualities too, I reminded him gently. He was intelligent, charming, and he did love you both very much. His failings were real, but they don't erase the positive aspects of who he was. But how do I separate those things? Kofi asked, frustrated. How do I admire the good while acknowledging the bad? That's what it means to see people as fully human, I said. No one is all good or all bad. We're all complicated mixtures of strengths and weaknesses, virtues and flaws. The challenge is to see people clearly, without either idealizing or demonizing them. That's easier said than done, Amara pointed out. Yes, I agreed. It's one of the hardest things to learn, especially when it comes to parents. We want them to be perfect, to be the heroes of our story. Realizing they're just flawed humans, doing their best, or sometimes not their best, is painful. I'm not sure I can ever think about Dad the same way again, Amara admitted. Every memory I have is now contaminated somehow. I understood her feeling. After discovering Thomas's affairs, I too had questioned every memory, wondering what had been real and what had been performance. It will take time to recontextualize those memories, I said, to understand that they can be genuine moments of connection, even if they existed alongside his failings. And what about you, Mom? Kofi asked. All these years of maintaining this image of Dad, of dealing with his debt alone, has it been worth it? It was a profound question, one I had asked myself many times over the years. I don't know if worth it is the right way to think about it, I said after a moment. Life gives us circumstances, and we make choices within those circumstances. Would I have chosen this path if I had known from the beginning what it would entail? Probably not. But given the reality I found myself in, a widow with 2 young children and substantial debt, I made the choices that seemed best at the time. But what about your dreams? Amara pressed. In the letter, Dad mentioned that you wanted to return to Nigeria someday, to build a school there. Did you ever want to do that? The question touched on ambitions I had put aside so long ago that they felt like they had belonged to another woman, another life. Yes, I acknowledged. When I first came to America, I had plans to return to Nigeria eventually, to use my education degree to build a school in my village, but life took a different turn. I fell in love, got married, had you two. Then after your father died, my focus became creating stability for our family here. But you're only 55, Kofi pointed out. You could still do it, couldn't you? Build that school, I mean. The idea seemed so distant, so improbable after all these years. And yet, a small flame of the old dream still flickered somewhere inside me. Perhaps, I said, though it would be complicated at this stage of life. My parents are gone now, and I've been away so long that I'm more American than Nigerian in many ways. But you still send money back, Amara noted. You still keep in touch with your siblings, your extended family. It was true. Despite the years and distance, I had maintained those connections, sending financial support when I could, staying involved in the lives of my nieces and nephews through regular calls and occasional visits. Yes, I agreed. Those ties remain important to me. So why not explore the possibility? Kofi suggested. Now that we're grown, now that the debt is paid, what's stopping you from revisiting that dream? What indeed? The question lingered in my mind long after my children had gone home that night. For 15 years, my life had been defined by responsibilities. To my children, to my students, to the debts Thomas had left. I had put aside personal ambitions, content to find meaning in fulfilling those obligations. But now Kofi and Amara were adults, making their own way in the world. The debts were paid. I was still young enough, healthy enough to consider new possibilities. Was it time to revisit the dreams of my youth, to see if they still called to me? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. For so long, I had been defined by my roles: mother, teacher, widow. The idea of stepping beyond those familiar identities, of reclaiming aspirations I had set aside decades ago, seemed almost like a betrayal of the life I had built. But perhaps that was the next step in my journey, not just telling the truth to my children about our family history, but telling the truth to myself about what I still wanted from life. The following morning, I called my brother Joseph in Nigeria. Though it was early in Maryland, it was afternoon there, and I caught him just as he was finishing his day at the secondary school where he taught mathematics. "Esther," he exclaimed when he heard my voice. "This is a surprise. Is everything okay with you? With the children?" "Everything is fine," I assured him. "Better than fine, actually. Kofi has graduated and has a good job. Amara is doing well in nursing school, but I've been thinking, remembering old dreams." "What dreams are these?" he asked, curiosity in his voice. "Do you remember when I first went to America? What I planned to do?" He laughed. "Of course. You were going to get your education degree, then come back and build the finest school our village had ever seen. You had it all planned out, the curriculum, the building design, everything." "Yes," I said, smiling at the memory of my younger self's certainty, her ambition. "That was the plan." "Life had other ideas," Joseph observed, his tone gentle. "It did. But I've been thinking, what if it's not too late? What if there's still a way to make some version of that dream happen?" There was a pause on the line. Then, with obvious excitement in his voice, Joseph said, "Are you serious, sister? Are you thinking of coming back?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "It's just a thought at this stage. But the children are grown now. I have some savings. I've been teaching for over 20 years, with experience in curriculum development, school administration. Perhaps there's a way to use that experience to make a difference back home, even if it's not exactly the way I envisioned it at 22. "Esther, this is wonderful," Joseph exclaimed. "You know there is still such need here for quality education, especially for girls. Your experience would be invaluable." "I'm not making any decisions yet," I cautioned. "But I wanted to talk to you, to see if you thought it was even possible after all this time." "More than possible," he assured me. "Necessary, vital. The village has grown, but opportunities remain limited, especially for girls. Many still marry young because education beyond the basic level requires traveling to the city, which many families cannot afford." As Joseph continued, describing the current educational landscape in our home region, I felt a stirring of the old passion, the sense of purpose that had driven my initial career choice so many years ago. We talked for almost an hour, Joseph providing me with contacts, suggestions for organizations that might partner with such an initiative, practical considerations I would need to address. By the time we hung up, what had been a vague notion had begun to take shape as a potential reality. That evening, I sat at my dining room table with a notebook, jotting down ideas, questions, possibilities. I wasn't making any firm decisions yet, but for the first time in years, I was allowing myself to dream beyond the boundaries of the life I had created after Thomas's death. The next day, I mentioned the conversation to Grace during our lunch break. "Nigeria?" she repeated, her eyes wide. "You're thinking of moving back to Nigeria?" "Not permanently, necessarily," I clarified, "but perhaps for extended periods, to work on establishing an educational program for girls, maybe eventually a small school." "And what about your life here? Your job, your house, your children?" "My job. Well, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I could retire in a few years with a full pension. The house, it's just a building. It served its purpose while the children were growing up, but now it's more space than I need, more maintenance than I want. And Kofi and Amara, what do they think about you potentially moving halfway around the world? They're actually the ones who brought it up, I told her, explaining our recent conversation. I think they're ready to see me pursue something for myself after all these years of putting their needs first. Grace studied me for a moment, then smiled. You know, I see something in you right now that I haven't seen in a long time. A spark. Excitement. It feels good, I admitted. Scary, but good. Then I think you should explore it, she encouraged. Not make any hasty decisions, but see where this path might lead. You've spent 15 years taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time for Esther to take center stage in her own life. Over. The next few weeks, I did just that. Exploring possibilities, researching organizations working on girls' education in Nigeria, even looking into potential funding sources for such an initiative. I didn't tell Kofi and Amara about these preliminary steps, not wanting to alarm them with what might still be just a passing fancy. But the more I investigated, the more the old dream reasserted itself, evolving from the ambitious plans of my youth into something more grounded, more realistic, but no less meaningful. Then, on a Sunday afternoon, Kofi and Amara arrived at my house unannounced. They had a folder with them, similar to the way they had arrived with Thomas's letter 2 months earlier. But their expressions were different this time. Excited, rather than distressed. We have something to show you, Kofi said, as they sat down at the dining room table. He opened the folder to reveal printouts of flight information, visa applications, and information about a conference on educational initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa, scheduled for the following summer in Lagos. What is this? I asked, confused. Your Christmas present, Amara explained, smiling. We've been talking, and we think it's time for you to at least explore your old dream. This conference would be the perfect starting point. You could make connections, learn about current initiatives, see if it's something you really want to pursue. I stared at the documents in disbelief. You did all this research? Uncle Joseph helped, Kofi admitted. We called him last week, and he mentioned you'd been asking questions about educational needs back home. He told us about this conference and suggested it might be a good first step. I was touched beyond words by their thoughtfulness, by the way they had embraced this possibility for me. This is incredible, I said, emotion making my voice unsteady. But the expense, these conferences can be costly, and then there's the flight, accommodation. It's covered, Amara assured me. We've been saving. Consider it 15 years of missed Mother's Day presents rolled into one. I can't accept this, I protested weakly. It's too much. Mom, Kofi said firmly, for 15 years you put your dreams on hold to give us stability, education, opportunities. You worked multiple jobs to clean up Dad's mess while creating a loving home for us. Let us do this for you. Please. The sincerity in his voice, the love in both their eyes, broke down my resistance. Okay, I said, wiping away tears. Thank you. This means more to me than you can know. There's one condition, Amara added, her expression turning serious. What's that? We're coming with you, she declared. At least for part of the trip. We want to see where you came from, meet our extended family, understand that part of our heritage better. This unexpected addition to their gift moved me even more deeply. Throughout their childhoods, I had tried to instill an appreciation for their Nigerian heritage, cooking traditional foods, telling stories of my childhood, teaching them snippets of my native language. But Thomas had subtly undermined these efforts, emphasizing their American identity over their African roots. To hear them express a desire to connect with that heritage now felt like a circle completing. I would love that. I told them, more than anything. As we discussed the details of the proposed trip, I marveled at how our family dynamic had evolved in the 2 months since they had discovered Thomas's letter. What had initially seemed like a devastating revelation, a betrayal of trust, had somehow become a catalyst for deeper understanding, for new possibilities. The truth, painful as it had set all of us free in unexpected ways. Kofi and Amara were reckoning with a more complex, more human understanding of their father, and by extension, a more nuanced view of family, of love, of human fallibility. And I was rediscovering dreams I had set aside, aspects of myself that had been submerged in the roles of mother, widow, provider. That night, after my children had gone, I took out Thomas's letter one more time, reading his words again, his confession, his remorse, his acknowledgement of the way I had protected our children from painful truths. I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for 15 years. "You were right, Thomas," I said aloud, to the empty room. "They did deserve to know the truth someday. I just wish it had been on my terms, not yours or theirs." I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Then I placed it in the carved wooden box from my grandmother, alongside the candid wedding photo and other mementos of my life with Thomas. The good and the bad, the joy and the pain, all part of the complex tapestry of our shared history. Whatever came next. Whether I pursued this revived dream of educational work in Nigeria, whether I remained in the life I had built in America, or found some balance between the two, I would do so with a new freedom. Freedom from secrets, from protective lies, from the constraints of the narrative I had constructed to shield my children, and perhaps myself. At 55, with my children grown, and the burdens of Thomas's legacy finally lifted, I was ready to write the next chapter of my life, not as a widow, not as the keeper of family secrets, but simply as Esther. A woman with her own dreams, her own story still unfolding. 6 months later, as our plane descended toward Lagos, with Kofi and Amara beside me, I looked out at the landscape of my birth country, the vibrant green of the vegetation, the red-brown of the earth, the sprawling cityscape coming into view. I hadn't been back in over 10 years and never with my children. "Are you nervous?" Amara asked, noticing my tight grip on the armrest. "A little," I admitted. "It's been a long time. So much has changed. The country, me, everything." "But some things remain the same," Kofi observed. "Family, roots, the dreams that shape us, even when life takes unexpected turns." I smiled at my wise son, then looked at my beautiful daughter. "Thank you both for this. For understanding, for forgiving, for helping me rediscover parts of myself I thought were gone forever." "Thank you," Amara replied, "for finally letting us see the whole truth. About Dad, about yourself, about our family. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." As the plane touched down, I felt a sense of coming full circle. 33 years after leaving Nigeria as a young woman full of dreams, I was returning with my American-born children, ready to explore whether some version of those early ambitions might still have a place in my life. The journey ahead was uncertain. This trip was just an exploration, the conference just a first step in assessing whether the dream of contributing to education in my homeland was still viable, still meaningful. Perhaps nothing would come of it. Perhaps it would lead to a whole, new chapter of my life. Either way, I would face it with honesty, with my children, and with myself. The truth had nearly torn us apart, but ultimately, it had freed us to discover who we really were, both as individuals and as a family. Not the perfect, idealized family of the narrative I had maintained for 15 years, but something more authentic, more resilient, more deeply connected. As we gathered our belongings and prepared to disembark, I thought of Thomas's letter 1, last time. The letter he had left for our children. The letter I had hidden away. The letter they were never supposed to read until after my death. I wish they never opened it. I had thought that day, when they appeared at my door, the envelope in hand, their faces etched with confusion and hurt. Now, 6 months later, with my grown children beside me and new possibilities stretching before us, I felt differently. The truth, painful as it had ultimately been a gift, breaking us open only to heal us more completely, revealing not just Thomas's failings but my own strength, not just past deceptions, but future possibilities. Some letters are meant to be opened, it seemed. Some truths are meant to be told, and some dreams, long deferred, are meant to be reawakened when the time is finally right. Ready? Kofi asked as we stepped toward the exit. I took a deep breath, feeling the humid air of my homeland filling my lungs, and nodded. Ready, I said, stepping forward into whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story about family secrets, healing, and finding the courage to pursue forgotten dreams, please like and subscribe. Your support allows me to continue sharing stories that explore the complex realities of family, forgiveness, and finding yourself even when life takes unexpected turns. What would you have done in Esther's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below.